Good evening. Welcome, everybody, to our Sunday night. What used to be football Sundays, but tonight is just a wonderful Sixers Sunday. You just watched the game, Aaron?
We were begging for it not to be football Sunday anymore, and we're somewhat happy as a result of that. I watched the game, got some stuff to go over. So I don't know. Were you listening to the announcers, or did you watch it with the volume off? What was
No,
going on?
I didn't have volume on.
Okay, so the game was won in the third quarter, right? I mean, they went into halftime with, I think, what, a 4 or 5, 6-point lead.
Yeah, and then I think they scored, 45 in the third quarter? 46.
Yeah. So this is what happened in the third quarter, just for anybody who didn't watch this game. The Sixers, this is probably the most dominant third quarter of this season by any team. Scored on 22 of 23 trips, Justin. Shot 77% from the floor. Went on a 32-10 run over the last 8 minutes. Outscored the Spurs 42-21 over that span. And that was the worst loss in franchise history for the Spurs.
It was bad for them, bud. I mean, and this was you look at all the way around not having Joel Embiid. I mean, I wrote down the numbers: 23 from Toby, 21 from Seth, 14, 4, and 9 from Ben, 16 points from Danny Green, 16 more from Furkan off the bench.
16 efficient points from Danny Green.
Bro, and you read that box score, it's kind of like, wow. So basically everything they threw went down. That's really what it looks like.
Yeah.
And dude, listen, I know that San Antonio is not the powerhouse that we used to have back in the day, but let me tell you something, bro. Any team with Greg Popovich leading it and a guy like DeMar DeRozan on that team, young stars like DeJounte Murray, they have guys down there, and that's a Greg Popovich-led team, and they play defense down there. And this team, without their best offensive weapon, I mean, 134 to 99 is nuts.
Yeah, and to be fair, they were down DeRozan and Aldridge tonight, but you know, one thing that I was just thinking throughout the game is we used to talk last year when Brett Brown was coaching, and we used to crave, like we would play the Celtics, and we watch the Celtics play, we'd watch even the not so good Spurs with limited talent play. And we'd watch Nick Nurse's team in Toronto play, and we were over and over just like, the coaching difference is the gap is so big. And we wish we were like, if we just had a coach like Brad Stevens. I'm watching the Sixers tonight, and all I'm thinking to myself is Doc has started to separate himself this year from the rest of the coaches in the NBA, the rest of the coaches in the East. And remember, we had a conversation, and initially when when Doc Rivers was fired, we were like, Ty Lue might be the best option. We realized Doc Rivers is available. And Ty Lue's done a really good job with the Clippers this year. He did a good job with them last year, aside from his players kind of blowing that, lead. But he's done a good job this year. And I still think at this point we're both happy with the Doc Rivers coaching hire over anything. It's been impressive, to say the least.
Yeah, I mean, Doc is a big part of it. I really got to talk about, dude. So I called you the other day, right? And I said to you, I'm going to give you numbers, and I want you to answer a question without knowing who the player is.
Yeah.
And this is, as much as Doc is a bonus, I think that Tobias Harris is getting the most of what he's capable of because he's back in Doc's system. That's what led to the trade a couple of years ago to Philadelphia in the first place. So if I told you that you were going to get a player that averages 20 points a game, shoots 50% from the field, 40% from three, and 90% from the free throw line, and I asked you if that guy was a max contract player, you'd be an idiot to say no. That's a max contract player. To average 20 points a game and have such efficiency of 50, 40, and 90, that's a max contract player. That is Tobias Harris right now. That is what Tobias Harris is providing for you. I think he's just under 89% from the free throw line, but that's what he's giving you, dude. Yeah. And he is, I think we've gotten to the point now where we really do got to take away the idea of Tobias Harris is overpaid or overvalued. And like I just got into a gigantic Facebook war a couple days ago in comments with somebody, a friend of mine. who's trying to make the argument that this offseason, you have to move on from Ben Simmons or Tobias Harris. You don't have a choice because your salary cap 3 years from now, you're going to have to re-sign Joel Embiid. There is a million reasons why this had to happen. And my only question back is what are you getting for Tobias Harris? I'm not saying I don't trade Toby for Zach LaVine. If I have Zach LaVine on the table for Tobias Harris and maybe a couple of picks, I'm probably going to make that move. And then I'm going to figure out my 4 thereafter because Zach LaVine is going to be a game changer. Yeah. But if you're telling me I'm trading Tobias Harris for a couple of first-round picks, a stretch 4, and a bench scorer, I'm not giving up my max guy that scores 20 points a game for those people. Like I don't understand. And we were a part of this for a long time talking about how overpaid and underperforming Tobias Harris was. And since Doc Rivers took over this team, bro, that's not the case anymore.
Well, so we watched him on the Clippers lead a bad roster and be somewhat of the best player and then get into the playoffs in the West. And we're like, we start clamoring from him when we hear he's available. We're like, go out and get Tobias Harris. And Sixers go out and get Tobias Harris. And then he's just not quite as efficient. You start to realize he's a bit of a liability on defense. But even this year, if you watch him defensively, it's night and day from last year. And the whole Sixers team, I mean, we just put up, 130 points or 120 points against the Spurs. But the reason we won that game is because everybody got clamped. Yeah. I mean, they were
your final score is 134-99. Offensively, you were good. You scored 134 points. But you held the Spurs to 99. And again, no Aldridge, no DeRozan. But Pop doesn't run a team where one guy means anything. I mean, since Tim Duncan, there's not been the one guy. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So I'm sorry, dude. For me, I mean, this is to have this is the proof positive of how bad Brett Brown was last year and the 6 years prior. This is the difference between a coach that matters and understands the game and adapts and improves, and having a guy like Brett Brown that is just a filler coach. Doc Rivers just went up against Greg Popovich without his star player, without the leading MVP candidate of the season, and whooped on Greg Popovich's team.
Yeah. And Pop was, Pop's never good. There's no excuses for Pop. He's like, I don't care if all of our starting five's down, this should be a 10-point game. Like if we lose, but they got dominated up and down the court the whole game. There was 4 or 5 Sixers and double. We didn't get pretty much anything. I mean, Dwight Howard made a couple energy plays. We barely got anything out of any of our bigs, though. It was all the guards, all the forwards playing really well, tipped balls, deflected passes, turnovers leading to points, and then just a barrage of threes that just every three went in by the end of the game, especially in the second half. Danny Green started off really hot, which got the whole offense going. Ben started off slow and then picked it up a little bit. And Toby's just been consistent for 4 quarters for the better part of the season. We had a little stretch just in the beginning of the year where like Toby would only show up in one half. And it was like it was like the first 7 or 8 games. And then all of a sudden, he just became the guy that we paid him to be. And it's impressive. And you can definitely make a case. I'm not sure who I would have taken off the All-Star team and put Toby on. But he definitely had a case. And it's hard to argue with how efficient he's been. And I think you only trade Toby for 2 guys that are semi-available, which is Bradley Beal and Zach LaVine, and maybe you give up a couple picks with them, but I'm not trading him for depth at this point. He's too valuable. Yeah.
No, especially because right now you still have Danny Green and Seth Curry in your starting lineup. Like your starting lineup is not complete enough to get rid of your third option. It's just not. And again, dude, your third option, when your number 1 option goes out, like Toby scored 23 tonight. That's huge, right? Toby scored 23 and had 9 boards and 7 assists. Like he is just playing a different style of basketball than what we've seen out of him. And I think it's Doc Rivers, bro. Tobias Harris made an all-star game with Doc Rivers in LA because Tobias Harris, his game fits what Doc Rivers does. And I think Doc has really unlocked Tobias isn't a guy that needs the ball in his hand 2/3 of the time. He's a third option who's happy with just, if a play breaks down and he's got 6 seconds to ISO up and try to get a shot, he'll just do it every time you ask him to. But he's also a guy that's willing to distribute. He goes after rebounds, and the 4 is his natural position. And that was really what made my nuts itch last year, bro. Brett Brown tried to squeeze him into a 3, and he just does not. He's not a good enough shooter. because when he has higher volume, his efficiency is much lower. And what he's doing, dude, you can't watch these last 3 weeks, 4 weeks of Tobias Harris and tell me that that guy's not worth the money. And then again, 6 months ago at the beginning of the season, maybe we do trade him for a half a bag of balls and a couple of bench players because we didn't see this. You can't take a guy that's averaging 20 points as your third option and just ship him out because he costs money. It just doesn't make sense, dude. TV deals come, caps go up. You're going to be fine. There's not going to be a problem with the numbers, and you're going to be able to attract. That was the other part of this argument, which drives me fucking insane. The media and the fan base are too difficult to deal with, so older veteran players don't want to come here because the microscope is too strong. And I don't necessarily disagree with that take, but if you build a team that's a legit contender, if you get to an NBA Finals and just need a couple of pieces to push you over, I don't care who you are, bro. Danny Green's got 3 rings. He's just trying to chase another one. You'll get veterans that are not going to be the same guy that they were, that will come out here and play for a season if it means a title. It doesn't matter how bad the fan base gets. It doesn't matter how fucking scrutinizing the media is. That's such a bullshit excuse to me. You're not going to lure enough.
It is. But I've been watching. I mean, just for an example, and they're harder on the football team than they are on any other team here, but not by much. They're hard on everybody. We traded Carson Wentz fucking 2 weeks ago at this point, and all I see is fucking Carson Wentz posts from the media. There's a story that comes out the other day about an argument Howie and Lane got in 2 years ago where Howie apologized to them and they made up. Like, there's just shit that comes out that doesn't need to, and they just want to create these stories. And in Philadelphia, they're the most toxic media. They're more toxic than New York. New York is like, they get after you, and it's a big city, and you're all over the place, and it's got the glitz and the glam. Philly's just straight blue collar, and they have a toxic media, and it's just a bad combination. So I can see, like, you know, why guys come and go and why guys struggle with it. But for the type of team that the Sixers have in the window to win a championship, there are going to be guys that don't give a shit about that, and they're going to be strong-minded. They're going to come here. Ben Simmons has been getting torched by the Philadelphia media for the better part of his career here. Started off with an injury, won Rookie of the Year, won't shoot the basketball, dating Kardashians, and they're just fucking hammering away because he won't shoot the basketball. And, you know, the result ends up being he stays here, he kind of ignores it, makes some all-star teams. I mean, these are the type of personalities that are on this team. It's a good thing. One thing I wanted to mention is the level of toughness this year versus last year, with the toughness I see in the guys getting in the paint and fighting for the ball and fighting for rebounds and driving to the basket and not being scared of the shot blockers that are there, and B, dunking on people, Simmons dunking on people. There's a level of toughness that Doc Rivers has brought to the team that hasn't been present for 4 years, and eventually that's going to end up being the difference between letting Kawhi beat you in Toronto in Game 7 and actually advancing to the finals.
Well, yeah, and again, I mean, you look at that play and beyond the wild luck of the quadruple doinker to fall down. If you play that inbound a little more aggressive, Kawhi doesn't get in position to make that shot. And that is a coaching thing, man. There's no doubt. I don't know anybody who can look at this team and not say that the biggest difference in this team, like Joel Embiid's play is much more consistent and much stronger. That's a change. Ben is more aggressive. That's a change. Toby is more efficient. That's a change. None of this shit happens without Doc Rivers. Doc Rivers is, in my opinion right now, has to be the best coach in this city. I mean, and instantaneously in year one. I mean, Alain Vigneault with the Flyers is a really, really, really good head coach. A lot of people who don't know hockey don't know who Alain Vigneault is or what he's done in his career. The Flyers are weird because they've got a handful of really fucking old guys, and they've got a bunch of young kids that don't know how to fucking spell hockey yet. So Alain Vigneault's just trying to figure it out, right? Doc Rivers looks so good because he's got a team full of guys ready to fucking win. I mean, Joe is in year 6. Ben is in year 5. Danny Green's a grizzled veteran. Furkan has gotten a little flow underneath of him. There's too much positive here. And Doc Rivers is just going to be basically going to be the guy that gets heralded for everything because he's the coach that got him there. And it's Doc that's the change, man. There's no doubt about it. The defensive difference, right? Like, look at this team defending now compared to last year. They were always good defensively. But now, dude, it's like without the defense rolling, we're not even trying to get the offense going. We have to clamp down first and then get moving. And that's Doc's system, and it works with these players, dude.
Yeah, now we talked on the phone yesterday, and I had asked you, and we had talked a little bit about how much Embiid's absence for the next 2 to 3 weeks affects the MVP race, because there's a couple things that are going against him, right? Realistically, there's a couple things going against him. One, he's going to end up missing more games than any other MVP candidate. I know his PER is higher. I know the point differential when he's on the floor is massive compared to almost anybody else in the league. But on the other side of the NBA in the Western Conference, there's a guy out there who hasn't won an MVP in 8 years, who could have probably won 4 in the last 8 years, who's going to play every single game, who means just as much to his basketball team. We talked about this, but in a COVID season where there's a lot of players that are missing games for various reasons, what are the chances that this just kind of – what has to happen for Joel Embiid to come back and actually secure an MVP? Because he was by far and away, before he just got hurt the other day, the front runner.
He has to average 30 and 12. I mean, he has to play every game left on the schedule, or damn near. I mean, if he takes 1 or 2 rest games in the final 15 or 20, it is what it is. But he has to average over 30 points a game. He has to average over 12 rebounds a game. And I would tell you that he has to be, I mean, borderline perfect efficiency-wise. He's got to shoot over 55% from the floor. He has to not turn the ball over 7 times a game. I mean, he has to regain the form that he had. And the reason why I think it's unlikely Embiid wins an MVP is just because of that. I don't know that he has the ability, with having a 2-week block where he's really got to rest that leg and he can't do whatever it's been, that he's kept himself in such good shape. I don't know that there's not going to be a ramp up week or two where he's going to be sloppy or inefficient. You know what I'm saying?
So by the time he comes back, it's mid-March, right? So he's hopeful to come back at the beginning of April. It's probably going to be after the first week of April. So they might be looking at this. There's a April 6th game against the Celtics. They might be trying to eye to see if, they can get that conference game. Their schedule gets pretty tough at that point, so he has a chance to start making it Celtics, Mavericks, Nets, Clippers, Suns, Bucks, all in a small stretch. And then they kind of finish out the season against some weaker opponents, but guys that are going to be fighting for seeding in the Eastern Conference. I would say, I remember the MVP race last year. I think we both thought that LeBron was making his case. They beat the Bucks, when him and Giannis were kind of 1 and 2, and then they were taking the lead in the West, and he was making his case. Joel Embiid's going to have that kind of run in his last 7 to 10 games and be so dominant that the media is going to look at this and the writers are going to look at this and they're just going to be like, there's no way we can't give it to him. The other thing that's probably going against him, though, Bud, is that I'm now obviously convinced, I really am, that the Nets will be the 1 seed. But if the Lakers aren't the 1 seed in the West, it doesn't matter. All that shit goes out the window.
But why? Why are you convinced? I mean, again, what more needs – let me ask you this question. I don't want to ask you why you're not convinced. Let me ask you a different question. What more do you need to see this team do? What more conflict do they need to overcome? What more adversity do they need to face and not look like they did last season for you to understand that this is the best team in the East?
What's happening is, the main thing is that the Nets are doing this right now and staying on the Sixers' heels without their best player.
But again, we talk about this every time, Aaron. When Kevin Durant comes back, somebody is going to be affected. There's a third guy and still 1 ball.
I'm not even talking about on the offensive side of the ball, though. He's probably their second best defensive player. I mean, just because of his length.
And he's still bad at that part. He's not a good defender.
He's above average. He's not great.
I would call him average, but okay, you can call him a little bit above. It makes you feel better.
I don't see. They're going to have to, like you said, and the other thing, here's the other thing we actually talked about yesterday. If they go 7-3 while Embiid's out, that hurts his MVP chances, right?
No.
Didn't you say that to me when we were on the phone yesterday?
No, I don't. It could. So this is what I thought of after we had this conversation. If Joel Embiid comes back and plays the way that he was, I genuinely believe that the writers and the guys that orchestrate these awards LeBron's not going to win another one. They're not going to let him. That's the reason why he hasn't won one in so long. They do not want LeBron James adding any more to his legacy of being greater than Michael Jordan. They don't want it, bro. They just can't accept it. So if he wins championships right now, they always have the asterisk of, oh, he needed Anthony Davis, and now he's winning, and he's probably not going to get to 6 in total. I disagree with that. I think he probably could get to 6, but that's just my own opinion.
Yeah.
I don't think that this league wants to see LeBron James win. Now, Giannis is not playing close to good enough to be up there in the talks.
Giannis could score 35 and 15, and he's not going to win an MVP.
Right.
This year.
Damian Lillard's having a great year, but can you give MVP to a guy who's going to take a team to the second round and oust again?
They would have. Well, if so, here's the thing with Dame. If Portland's actually making like a little bit of a hot run without their two out of 3 of their best players. So if they end up missing that stretch and finishing second or third in the West, with those guys being out the extended period, CJ McCollum was averaging 27 points per game before he went out. So it's like, and Nurkic hasn't even played. So if they end up being the 2 seed, I think you can start making that case for Dame, but his numbers just don't stack up with what you usually look for in MVP candidates. It's numbers, record, your per, and what the plus minus is with you on and off the floor. That's really what the MVP boils down to.
When you talk about efficiency rating, bro, I mean, Joel Embiid being second overall and being the second leading scorer in the league right now, there's too many factors that go towards Joel Embiid. Let me put it to you like this. If the season ends once Joel Embiid comes back and the agreed upon 1 and 2 is still LeBron and Embiid, I don't think there's any chance that LeBron James takes an MVP away from Joel Embiid. LeBron is 36. They're understanding that this league is going to have to move forward without him at some point in the not too distant future. So they're trying to build up. This is why Steph Curry and the Golden State Warriors brand got built up. This is why Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving going to Brooklyn.
They're also remember before the season they were trying to already build the case that like Luka was the clear front runner for MVP.
Right,
right.
Luka and Kristaps in Dallas. Right. They're trying to move forward. If LeBron James was going to win another MVP, it had to have happened 5 or 6 years ago. He's too close to the end now where unless he does something crazy like 35, 9, and 11 for an 80-game season and has a deep run in the playoffs where he is so far and away better than everybody else, he's never going to win another MVP. I mean, again, you have to agree with this thought. Why hasn't he won in the last 8 years? Because they don't want him to. It's not because he hasn't been.
Well, they got tired because he has 4, right? So he had 4 in his first 10 seasons. 40% of the time he's an MVP, and they're like, yeah, I don't want to vote for him anymore. And Miami, couldn't deny it. He won 2 out of 4 years. He was easily the best player in the world, and it wasn't close. And when Golden State started winning and Steph was putting up these crazy numbers in 3 quarters, you're like, all right. But what happened, Just, is the media had started to focus on the numbers so much that they lost track of value. And LeBron was always the most valuable player. But after a season where Russ averaged a triple-double for the first time since Oscar Robertson, you were like, okay, like we fucking got to give it to Russ. KD left. They made the playoffs. He averaged a triple-double, whatever. Steph's efficiency through 3 quarters, 50, 40, 90, scoring 30 points for the first time in NBA history, unanimous MVP. And then, the Warriors were winning. He should have gotten the MVP award probably 2 of the years. You could have made the argument that both times Steph won, it could have been LeBron, right?
Yeah,
realistically.
No, for sure.
The thing going forward, Joel, since I've made negative points about it, I have to make some positive ones. The Lakers are 3rd in the West. The first 2 teams don't have an MVP candidate, which are the Jazz and the Suns, unless you want to consider the Clippers one. And I don't think Kawhi or Paul George are anywhere close to winning it. And Dame's all the way down at this point. The Trailblazers are 5th. So they would have to make a real push in the West for people to start talking about Dame as an MVP. And then you look at the East, they're not going to give it to James Harden this year, regardless of how he ends up finishing because he left the Rockets. Kyrie is never going to get an MVP award, no matter how good he plays and where the Nets finish.
He'll never deserve one.
He hates him, right? So that doesn't fucking matter.
He'll never deserve one.
Yeah, so there's a lot of things going for him. So there would have to be a late push by someone on some team like Dame, like LeBron, like winning his last, 12 out of 13 games, averaging a triple-double for him to win something like that. So you can really make the case that Joel's still going to be a big front runner when he comes back.
I mean, I think that again, dude, as long as it's LeBron that's up there, I don't think that this league wants to see LeBron win again. And I mean, you've got too many other, like, here's the thing, right? Is what LeBron is doing with the Lakers any more impressive than what Chris Paul's done with the Suns? It's just not. I mean, Chris Paul is a guy that LeBron is a walking NBA Finals trip. Chris Paul takes lottery teams to the playoffs. That's what he does. That's his entire career. That's what he does. And he's he's probably, I think I'd be comfortable saying, the most underappreciated and underrated point guard of my lifetime. I think he is easily, he might be the most underappreciated, undervalued player in the NBA of my lifetime. Because
so we talked about this yesterday. So let me pose a couple questions, because we both said that we were talking about the Suns' ability to potential coaches of the year is what we were talking about.
Right.
You're like, is Doc going to win it? Is Nash going to win it? And I'm like, no, obviously, because they really do stick with coaches to who has the best regular season. They really stick to it as far as coaches go. So if the Jazz continue to blow teams out in the West and end up placing first in the West with the Lakers out there, the Clippers out there, the Suns out there, the Jazz are going to win it. And you said, well, if the Suns end up, in first or second, does their coach have a chance? I think it's Monty Williams over there, right? Mm-hmm. And my point was probably not, because it just kind of seems like Chris Paul takes away from the value of the coach, because he did it last year with Scott Brooks. We're talking about Scott Brooks being one of the best, and Chris Paul's dragging these guys to the playoffs, right? So almost like having Chris Paul on your team and seeing the difference it made in 1 year kind of hurts your coaching resume a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, Chris Paul is probably the other than LeBron James, the best coach on the floor. I mean, he's I would struggle to, I mean, if I really sat back and thought about guys that had the ability to be a coach on the floor in the game, I mean, LeBron immediately, Chris Paul immediately, and then after that, it's kind of those two are at the very top, and there's a steep fall before you find the next guy. I mean, Chris Paul is every bit as good a point guard as LeBron James, and LeBron James is an elite point guard, which is crazy because we didn't know that till he was 35. But Chris Paul. I mean, dude, and again, like, LeBron is 6'8", 260 pounds. He is an athletic freak, bro. Chris Paul is what, 6 foot, 6'1", maybe.
Yeah, he's listed at 6'2" or 6'3", but he's 6 foot. He's not.
He's a little guy, dude. That is.
I think the State Farm guy is taller than him. State Farm like towers over Chris Paul.
He's stayed in shape, dude. He's done enough. He's done enough to take a lot. Dude, how does the Oklahoma City Thunder get to the playoffs with only Chris Paul? I mean, that's all they had, bro. It's the same team the year prior. It's just I don't get how a guy like that goes so unnoticed. I mean, that's a guy too, right? Like, how is it possible that Chris Paul hasn't been a multiple MVP award winner? How is it possible that Chris Paul hasn't had, I mean, any type of recognition that he deserves?
So the Hornets were at least relevant when he was there, and then weren't for a long time. The Clippers were one of the best teams in the West for years, and then everybody stayed and Chris Paul left and the franchise collapsed. He goes to OKC and they just lost Russ, and first he goes to Houston, and then they take a huge lead on the Warriors, who were the overwhelming favorite to win. He gets injured. The fucking Houston Rockets collapse. He leaves and they do worse. Goes to OKC, should have no chance of making the playoffs. Everybody's like, OKC throwaway year. Chris Paul's over the hump. He's, nothing's going to happen. Fucking makes the playoffs. And now the Suns go from, I think they they were the 9 seed last year. I think they missed the playoffs by a couple games, and now they're the second in the West. It's incredible. It's like the value of Chris Paul is definitely, we don't talk about enough. I don't care about the points per game. I think he's somewhere around like 16 to 18. So he's not going to get talked about for the award. But Barkley made a point on TNT the other day. It's like, well, what is the difference between Nash winning with the Suns the way he won and what Chris Paul's doing this year? It's like
There
two
isn't one.
There's not.
Yeah,
He's
there's
actually
no difference. It's the league is different now, right? It's the same reason why Jason Williams can't play in today's league. Jason Williams, when we were kids, bro, Jason Williams was the shit. That fucking behind the back elbow pass and all that crazy shit he did. Now, that flash appeal, that like, unless you're Ben Simmons and you're 6'10" and just a behemoth of a human, the game doesn't translate the same. And Chris Paul is playing old man basketball successfully against a much bigger, much faster, much more athletically gifted class of kids. And I think it goes unnoticed. And I don't think that's fair to Chris Paul. I mean, Chris Paul, when it's all said and done, I mean, it might be the most underrated, underappreciated NBA player of my lifetime. I mean, I can't think of a guy that has provided as much as he has and gotten so. I mean, Tony Parker and Manu Ginobili are probably as recognizable to most people as Chris Paul is, right? Like Chris Paul deserves LeBron James type class. I mean, this guy's 36 years old and he's a normal dude, bro. He's not Ben Simmons or LeBron James or Nikola Jokic or Joel Embiid, these big freak athletes. He's a 6 foot tall dude, bro. He's a guy you walk past in the grocery store and don't even look at twice. And he's 36 years old and he's still playing in the NBA with these guys. It's unbelievable.
So just for reference for anybody that's listening, the year that Steve Nash won MVP, he was averaging 15.5 points, 11.5 assists, 3 rebounds, shooting 88% from free throw, shooting 55% from the field, and shooting 43% from 3. 15, 11, and 3 on 88, 55, and 43. 15.8 points, 9 assists. Where's the rebounds at? 5 rebounds almost. On 9% from the free throw line, 54% from the field, 39% from 3. It's almost identical. And he doesn't have he has Devin Booker, right? So we can't say he doesn't have, but that was the
but hold on a minute. Who did Steve Nash have?
He had Sean Marion, Amari Stoudemire. He had for that time.
Steve Nash had probably definitely a top 3, maybe the best pick and roll big men in the history of. See, people remember Amari Stoudemire for his burnout on the New York Knicks. A lot of people forget how dominant Amari Stoudemire was in Phoenix. Amari Stoudemire was an animal.
Yeah, anybody 5 years younger than us doesn't even know much about those Suns years, right? I mean,
and that's what I mean, bro. Amari Stoudemire, dude, that was probably 7.5 assists a game on average. Was just pick and rolls with Amari because he was that good, dude. His footwork was elite. He was strong. He could go up over anybody. He was a defensive monster. And you had Sean Marion. You had guys that. I mean, again, not saying that Devin Booker's not good and DeAndre Ayton's not a good player. They're not the same, man. They're just not the same.
Book is really good, but Ayton's nowhere. The gap between the bigs and the time they played, you have to remember too. The bigs meant a lot more during that era right there than they do right now. So Devin Booker is just going to score more points. But I think it was not even. It was Marion. It was Quentin Richardson was on the team. They had guys banging threes all over the fucking court. And they're kind of doing that right now in Phoenix, but it's all because Chris Paul's there. And
it begins and ends with him. His type of game is the reason why you have the ability to do what you're doing. That is what is so impressive out there. And I don't disagree that the Chris Paul's effect doesn't take anything away from the head coach. It has to. I mean, we've seen it again, like you mentioned last year. How does Billy Donovan not get any recognition or love for what he did? And it is because if you went back and watched, that was Chris Paul's effect. That wasn't Billy Donovan's effect. That was Chris Paul's effect.
Isn't he coaching the Pacers right now?
Billy Donovan?
No, I'm sorry. He's coaching the Bulls.
Yeah.
So the Bulls aren't even in a playoff spot. So they pretty much have what I consider a very similar team to what Chris Paul went into but instead of Chris Paul, you have Zach LaVine, right? So like the elevation of the games, they were in a playoff in the West, and the Bulls are still in the East. It's super impressive. He made Shy look real, by the way. The Eastern Conference has the Bulls right now. By the way, the Heat have been playing better and getting their guys back. Bulls are 11th. They're 2 games out of a spot.
I'm hopeful that the Miami Heat continue their run. So if you're right and the Brooklyn Nets wind up with the 1 seed, I'm hopeful that the Heat hold the 8th seed and just batter the Nets in the first series. Beat the shit out of them.
The Heat have worked their way up to 4th, so I don't even think, like, we were having a conversation about them making the playoffs or not, and I think they're actually going to be probably a top 5 seed. The Celtics, by the rumor, we have to talk about this real quick, and then we'll maybe move on to some football or some baseball. There was a rumor that they were offering multiple first-round picks for Jeremy Grant. So their biggest problem over there on the Celtics is, for whatever reason, for the last 2 years since Kyrie left, Brad Stevens hasn't wanted to hand over. He wants to play team offense. And it's the dumbest thing in the world to me, because you have an elite offensive playmaker. You just run the entire offense through Jason Tatum. Just fucking do it. Like, I'm watching this. I'm like, you're a great coach. I don't get why he wants to play a Spurs style of basketball where it doesn't matter who scores. It's not working. Jason Tatum has every tool in the bag offensively, but it doesn't make any sense to me, because I'm like, all right, well, they don't have any bigs. They have their best big man is Tice, who can stretch out a little bit, but just isn't a very good big man in general. And they're offering multiple firsts, and they think they're going to put themselves in a better position by getting Jeremy Grant, who does literally the same exact thing as Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. What am I missing?
Well, you're not missing anything. I mean, this is the problem, right? I mean, so first of all, Boston has the biggest question that they're going to have to answer is Jason Tatum or Jaylen Brown. Jaylen Brown cannot be a 2-guard. You've seen it. He can't do it. And if you move him to the 3, which is where he belongs, Tatum at the 4 is not bad, but it's just like Gordon Hayward playing the 4 in Boston before. It's just not the skill set that those guys have. It's not where you're maximizing that guy. So they really have to make the decision of if Jason Tatum is the guy they want to cornerstone their franchise around. And I think that they brought Kemba Walker in with the idea that Kemba would make that picture clearer. And it hasn't at all. It's only muddied the waters. Because not only is Kemba not what you had in Kyrie, I mean, not even close. Most could argue Terry Rozier was a better option to stay with and let Kemba Walker move on elsewhere.
Hornets look pretty smart right now.
Yeah, that is, and dude, and especially if the Hornets end up with, if there is a world that exists where you get Lonzo on that team for Terry Rozier, that's going to be a problem in the future. When they draft a big in the next couple of years, they're going to have a really, 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 really good young core of players over there. So I mean, I know, dude, it's unbelievable. It's unbelievable, and led by a Ball brother, which is even more wild. But like
Hayward have great years, yeah.
This is what Boston's faced with, dude. And like we said, I think we said it last week or the week before. I can't believe. I mean, dude, a year and a half ago, Brad Stevens was the next Greg Popovich. Brad Stevens was the best coach in the league by far. You know, Nick Nurse had come up because they had won, and there was guys, but it was Brad Stevens and everybody else of the young coaches, of the newer coaches.
Especially
and now,
in the East. Yeah.
Well, and now Celtics fans hate him. And he's looking like he doesn't know what he's doing. And I don't really understand. Again, what are we missing? What is so difficult about understanding that you have an excess of one kind of player? Why would you bring in another one of that kind of player? It just doesn't make sense, dude.
You know, Brown is a little better off the ball. Grant's a little better off the ball. Tatum's by far the best ISO player out of the 3, but Grant can make a strong case, 1A and 1B. But it's like they really are. They do all of the same thing. I think Grant's probably a better defensive player than Brown, but you're just muddying it up more. You're doing the same thing. It's almost like you're bringing in Kyrie when you already have Kemba there. Like it doesn't make any sense. Go get a big. I don't know what they're doing. I don't want them to know what they're doing. Like I hope they don't figure it out. But it's like what is sometimes it's funny, man. because we talk about what the Eagles should and shouldn't do all the time. And a lot of times when the fan base is overwhelmingly on one thing, they're right. And the guys, the GMs and the managers and all, they think like they know better than everybody else. It's been Howie Roseman's problem for the better part of the last 3 or 4 years. We want DK Metcalf. He wants JJ Arcega-Whiteside. You know, it happens over and over and over. We want, most people want Justin Jefferson. I was happy with the Rager pick. I really was. I when I looked at him, I couldn't tell what Justin Jefferson was, and I preferred Jalen Rager. But the majority of Eagles fans wanted Justin Jefferson, and it wasn't even close. The majority of Eagles fans ended up being right? So it's like,
yeah,
you see what's going on from the outside, and sometimes when you're in it, you have a lot of trouble trying to sort it out, but it's really easy to tell from the outside what the team fucking needs. And I think,
speaking of that, bro, go ahead, finish that point.
And I was just saying, I think one of the reasons I was so excited about getting Daryl Morey is he doesn't get too attached to the team where he can't step back, look from the outside, and see what's going on with his 76ers.
So I want to piggyback that into baseball real quick. So This is last year, like let's talk about Daryl Morey and Doc Rivers, right? So if the Philadelphia 76ers were able to acquire Doc Rivers in the COVID season, right? And let's say that we have to obviously make apples here. So the NBA season was a quarter of its normal length, and you had basically 7 or 8 new rules. And it was Doc's first year as a coach on this team. And he underachieved because they were trying to figure out a million things, right? And then the following year, you hired Daryl Morey to complement Doc Rivers. Like, if we make up, it happened in different seasons.
Yeah.
Your expectations going into that first season with Doc Rivers, you left disappointed. That was Doc Rivers. I needed better than where we ended. But the compliment of Daryl Morey and now a full season of basketball, you feel pretty confident going into that season, right?
Yeah.
Joe Girardi came to this Phillies team in a 60-game season. Now, for anybody who doesn't understand how baseball works, which I'm sure most do, regular seasons are 162 games. That is 102 less games than a regular season, than a normal regular season. Mm-hmm. Joe Girardi has won championships in New York, has won pennants, knows what it takes. Joe Girardi came to this team with Matt Klentak and Andy McPhail last year. Mm-hmm. Now, we didn't talk a whole lot about Phillies baseball last year during their weird little Corona season, but Matt Klentak and Andy McPhail are quite possibly the 2 worst front office guys in baseball up until the point that they both got relieved of their duties. Now, I believe Klentak is still a part of the organization with a different title, and McPhail's gone, I believe is how it worked out, or vice versa. And Dave Dombrowski got brought into this team this season. And Dave Dombrowski's reputation is he goes to a team on the cusp, and he walks in and he makes shit happen. He re-signs JT Realmuto. He re-signs Didi Gregorius. He brings in Archie Bradley to help in the bullpen. He addresses problems. He fills holes. He's not very well known for a farm system, but if you're winning in the major league level, who gives a shit about the farm system? Nobody cares about Lehigh Valley. Nobody cares about Reading. They care about the Philadelphia Phillies.
Prospects versus pros is always, I've never liked the argument. You get the pro.
Yeah. Exactly. The prospects exist to get your pros if you need them. Sixto Sanchez for JT Realmuto. You give a potentially great pitcher who you don't know about for the best catcher in baseball 100 out of 100 times.
Yeah.
So I really believe, dude, I've been listening to the radio the last couple of weeks leading into spring training and now where we are now. There's a lot of people who really believe that the Phillies are a lame duck in this division. Now, in exact difference of the Eagles being in the worst division in football, the Phillies are in the hardest division in baseball. It is by far the most talented, most aggressive. I mean, the Mets made big moves this year. Washington just won a World Series a couple years ago. The Braves, I think, have won the last 2 NL East titles. There is a lot of competition in this division. Joe Girardi going into his second season with a better roster, a better bullpen, and just knowing his locker room, just knowing his clubhouse better. I really believe the Phillies got a chance to compete this year, dude. And
again, we're going to get into this a little more because I didn't watch any Phillies baseball probably in the last 2 years. But wasn't the overwhelming opinion not necessarily people harping on the job that Joe Girardi did, and mostly harping on the inability to make moves and the pitching staff being so bad that they just couldn't hold.
I mean, dude, last season, their bullpen last year was quite literally the worst bullpen in the history of Major League Baseball.
Yeah, so I don't think anybody was necessary. And I get your point, comparing the two, but I didn't feel like when I was, watching the little bits and pieces and watching SportsCenter and listening to the radio that people were necessarily down and disappointed on the job Girardi did. It was just like, we got to get help in the bullpen. I mean,
it's more than just the bullpen. I mean, Rhys Hoskins underachieved. You went through that crazy shit with Odubel Herrera 2 years ago, which he might make the roster now. And now I'm going to have to spend 6 months listening to this fucking bullshit like any idiot on hoagie mouth motherfucker driving down 95 knows about Odubel Herrera's marriage better than he does. There's so many things that have happened in Philadelphia sports over the last couple of seasons. There's no stability. There's none. And the Sixers seem like the ship is on the right course, but we don't know yet. And the Phillies seem like now the ship is righted, but we don't know yet. And the Eagles are, you want to talk about turmoil, that's the fucking definition. Pull out Webster's right fucking now, and right next to turmoil is the fucking Eagle, because that's, who knows what's going on down there.
We'll transition to them in a second, but go ahead.
And you have the Flyers, who were poised to be the first seed in their conference this season, who've now fallen out of the playoffs in the last 3.5 weeks. There's so much shit going on. And I mean, dude, it is good that we've got fans in the stadium now. A couple thousand people are able to go. I don't know that made a difference tonight for the Sixers to have 3,500 people or 3,100 people, whatever it is. It may have, just to be feeling a little bit more like normal because somebody was there. I think once the crowds come back out, the vaccines rolled out, props to Mr. President Biden for actually getting people fucking vaccinated. Once all that shit happens and life resumes normal, I think the crowds are going to make as much of a difference as they used to. But I think that this last year and a half has thrown everything haywire everywhere. It's really changed a lot of the ways that you can look at how things go. And this is why it drives me nuts, man, to be driving in my car, my hour ride home from work, listening to hoagie mouth fucking Jay from the Northeast or whoever the fuck comes on WIP bitching about Joe Girardi didn't do well enough, or Doc Rivers isn't pushing Ben enough. Why isn't Ben Simmons shooting the basketball?
But that's Philadelphia fans and media, right? Not for nothing. It's a different situation, but we just all ran Doug Peterson out of town in a COVID-rid season with no training camp because we finished last in the division, in a bad division. So I get it, but we can't play with two sports over here and make an excuse for the coaches, and then over here we're fucking driving Doug Peterson out, right?
Well, bro, I don't know that that's what happened. I really genuinely, and I think a couple of years from now, bro, yeah. I think a couple of years from now when we really dive in, we might as well just get into the Eagles now. I'll start with this point. A couple of years from now, I genuinely believe whether it's Chris Long or one of these guys, that Jason Kelsey when he's out of the league, one of these guys just don't give a fuck. They'll just tell you how it is. Lane, exactly.
Yeah.
The reason why Doug got fired is because they didn't want to trade Carson. They did not want to eat their hat on Carson Wentz. They wanted to figure out how to make it work. And when Doug Peterson came in for that first offseason meeting, after the last meeting of the season prior, had those 3 weeks in between, when he came back in and he looked Jeff Lurie in the fucking eyeballs and he said to him, I believe our best chance forward is with Jalen Hurts or drafting a quarterback or whatever he said. Obviously not Carson Wentz. Jeff Lurie said, you got to go. I can't pick you over $128 million. I can't do it.
So then how does it unfold then that he ends up getting traded anyway?
Because Carson Wentz doesn't want to play here because he's a soft pussy. It's that simple. I mean, I'm sorry. They
didn't have any indication that Carson Wentz was going to be fucking begging for his way out after Peterson got fired.
No, I don't think so. I think that they
fired Peterson, he would want to stay.
Yeah, I think they really believed that the problem Carson had was Doug. I think that that's what they thought. Obviously, they were fucking wrong because Carson's not here. But I think that's what they believed at the time. And this is just how it is, dude. I had my niece and my parents over for dinner tonight, and the kids are playing out back with a fucking soccer ball. And this is the problem with everybody gets a trophy culture. It's a problem. Carson Wentz is soft. He wants all of the accolades when something goes right. When he has a great play, he wants to hear about it for the next 3 fucking years. And when he throws 3 interceptions in a game and fumbles twice, he wants you to forget about it before the game's over because he's weak mentally. And that is not what Jalen Hurts is. Jalen Hurts got benched in Alabama twice, then went to Oklahoma and took over, came here and played behind Carson Wentz, and without missing a beat, walked right in and took advantage.
The thing with Hurts, man, and I the more I think about it, the more I kind of get excited, is I've already watched him 3 times overcome pretty like odds that would kind of put a lot of guys into like a pit, right? 3 times I've already seen it. So the thing is, I might not be high on him, but I definitely don't doubt him. And that's like a good feeling to have. Like I had doubts with Carson Wentz. You have doubts with guys. I don't really have doubts that Jalen Hurts can't be a starter in the NFL.
It's Matt Stafford, right? It's the Matt Stafford factor. You're not going to be like, oh my God, Matt Stafford. But you're going to say Matt Stafford
can definitely win. We can definitely win. Yeah.
Right. As long as we address the rest of this team the right way, we've got a quarterback that can help us get there. And I got to ask you this, dude. Was Doug Peterson a good coach last year?
No. He was terrible.
And to me, not only is it 4 games, it's 4 games with a broken offense, with no weapons, with a bad head coach. So for all I know, dude, and again, I'm not going to try to sit here and say Nick Sirianni is some fucking offensive guru that Howie Roseman wants to do.
I don't know what Nick Sirianni is.
No, I have no fucking idea, dude. I don't know Nick Sirianni from a fucking can of paint. But if Nick Sirianni finds a way to create some form of using Jalen Hurts to the best of his ability and doesn't just call bad plays, I mean, doesn't have a 75-25 pass to run ratio, actually makes a game plan and is a good coach, Jalen Hurts could look like Russell fucking Wilson next year.
Well,
I'm not saying he will. I'm saying he could.
Here's what I'm getting excited about. I actually think, and I'm gonna put this kind of like this. That first of all, the Jets at number 2, they're not in a position to like, regardless of whether they love Jamar Chase or not. At number 2, with all the needs you have, I just don't think you're in a position to take a wide receiver. I don't know if you agree with that or not, but I think the number 2 pick.
I think if you're going to add an offensive weapon, the only one you can argue for is Kyle Pitts. I think a guy that addresses 2 positions in one guy offensively as a skill position, you could make up a reason why, but no, you can't draft a wide receiver or a running back. You either have to draft help for Sam Darnold and get him protected, or you got to draft his replacement because you're going to trade him.
Yeah, I agree. So Atlanta is terrible on defense, and they have good wide receivers, and Matt Ryan's 35 years old. I don't think they go wide receiver. Cincinnati's not going wide receiver. They still have Tyler Boyd, an array of guys. Who was the guy from Clemson? T. Higgins last year that had a really good year. So even if A.J. Green leaves, I think they get Joe Burrow, an offensive lineman. Miami's really the only team in position to take a wide receiver, and I'm praying because there's rumors that they're a front runner to land Kenny Golladay. I'm almost like because they're only going to draft a wide receiver if they don't sign a wide receiver in free agency. So the Eagles, with Jeff Lurie saying go all in on Jalen Hurts, the offensive line's kind of set, and I think it's a pretty solid offensive line. I don't think you can draft an offensive lineman, especially
on paper. While healthy, your O line is B+. That is your expectation.
Great.
And an overachievement is an A-. And if that's an overachievement is an A-, you take that offensive line every single time.
Yeah, like Herbig's a backup, had a great year. Dillard's going to be your backup. He was a first round.
Mailata shows you that he can play. Brandon Brooks is going to be back and healthy. Lane Johnson's going to be back and healthy. Jason Kelsey's giving you another year. Sayamalu took 20 steps forward this season as left guard. Their offensive, this is why if for some reason Penei Sewell falls past Cincinnati, you can't make that pick.
I don't think so.
Cannot make that pick.
And so I would even, like, if he's available, some team's going to want to come up and get him. I don't mind moving back a couple picks. But it's like whoever's the best available, whether it's Jamar Chase, Devontae Smith, or on your board, if your scouts tell you, because this guy's moving up draft boards and they think he's going to be a better – well, it's Jalen Waddle. But
Okay, I thought you were going to say Trey Lance, and we might have get the fist
no. But if he's the guy on your board and the scouts are like, hey, man, like I know you're high on these guys, but I think if Jamar Chase isn't there, Jalen Waddle's going to be better than Devontae Smith. I might be like, okay, like I'm okay with it, but they're going to draft a wide receiver or Kyle Pitts, right? Like
they have to. So I'm excited that you brought this up. I have a question for you.
Yeah.
So you got two guys you can draft, right? You can draft Marvin Harrison or Brandon Marshall. Who do you pick?
Marvin Harrison.
So I was listening to Ray Didinger today, who I respect tremendously when it comes to football. There's very few guys that I respect on the level of Ray Didinger when it comes to football.
Yeah.
I mean, the guy's in the fucking Hall of Fame for a reason. He knows the shit.
He knows football, yeah.
I was getting coffee at the Starbucks this morning, and he compared Devontae Smith's tape to Marvin Harrison. Now, I don't know how much we've talked about this on air. I know I've told you this before. I was a gigantic Peyton Manning fan as a kid. I watched Peyton Manning from college straight through his entire professional career. Every single year I followed Peyton Manning. He was my favorite football player. Ergo, Marvin Harrison is one of my favorite receivers of all time because that was the connection for so many years. I went and looked at Devontae Smith tape today, and I don't hate the comparison. Devontae Smith's release off the line of scrimmage is probably the best release I've seen out of a college player. Bro, at a level that is not – second place isn't close. Now, Jalen Waddle and Jamar Chase are big 50-50 guys, right? But so is Kyle Pitts. I mean, for my money, all the tape that I've watched the last couple of weeks, Kyle Pitts is the best 50-50 ball catcher in this draft, period.
Oh, yeah.
Like Jamar Chase is an animal. I don't want to take away from him.
He's the biggest boy. Yeah,
but his catch radius is gigantic, and he has hands that are like fucking glue traps. It's unbelievable. So for me, if I'm the Eagles and I have Jamar Chase, Kyle Pitts, and Devontae Smith, if I have my choice of the litter, I'm going Jamar Chase because he gives you a lot more. If Jamar Chase is off the board and I have Kyle Pitts and Devontae Smith, I'm probably leaning towards Kyle Pitts. I'm leaning towards the guy that can play the tight end, the Y, and I could stretch out to the X if I needed him to. I think that he gives you more. Again, draft a guy that addresses two positions with one pick. Who wouldn't do that?
I mean, if you know Kyle Pitts is going to be Darren Waller, you don't care whether he's a wide receiver.
Exactly. Who gives a shit? Pay him whatever he wants. It doesn't matter. If I have Kyle Pitts off the board and Jamar Chase off the board, and it's Jalen Waddle and Devontae Smith, I really have over the last week. If I can feel confident that Devontae Smith can put on 10 pounds, I only need 10 pounds. I need him at $180. 170 is too fragile. $190 is too heavy. He loses all of his ability. I need him to gain 10 pounds of lean muscle and know that he won't break down when Naaman comes and gets him, right?
Yeah.
If I can know that happens, I think Devontae Smith may be the best receiver since Calvin Johnson to come out of school. It is possible.
I agree. If he had 10 more pounds of muscle, because I watched him in back-to-back bowl games get hurt in college, so I'm a little like I think he's actually, as far as talent, as far as upside, as far as ceiling, I think actually he's better than Jamar Chase. But what worries me is that I'm going to get him and he's going to end up being Deshaun Jackson, which is a fast, great release, deep threat for his whole career that has trouble staying on the field. And when he's on the field, it's electric. What's that? Torrey
Smith, right?
Yeah.
Like that.
Yeah.
That you
I think he's going to be better. I think he's going to be better than that. Right. I think he's going to be better, and I think he has more tools. And the separation is actually when we watched Jefferson tape last year, right? We watched a lot of Jefferson tape. And we just couldn't tell because he was always in the slot uncovered at the start. So you didn't know if he could beat press. You knew he knew how to read the defense and get to the open spot, but NFL guys are a lot smarter. The defensive coaches are a lot smarter. So you didn't know how his tape was going to transition. I watched Devontae Smith, and I'm like, well, whether he's in the slot, whether he's over here, he's going to beat his guy if he's one-on-one. You stop Devontae Smith in zone with a guy over the top, but if you're trying to man Devontae Smith, you're not going to be able to do it. Problem is
even the guy over the top, you're going to take the speed away. You're going to take the deep threat away. But Marvin Harrison wasn't just a deep pass receiver. Marvin Harrison at 5'10", 175 pounds, was one of the best over-the-middle receivers for his entire career. because he was an elite level route runner. He got that release, and as long as he had a step or two, he wasn't in danger of getting hurt. He got popped a couple times, but he didn't get blindsided because of how good his release was.
Yeah,
and that's why, for me, dude, obviously, what I'm hoping for is I'm hoping that Devontae Smith continues to climb and climb and climb, and more people compare him to Marvin Harrison. And if Golladay doesn't end up in Miami, Devontae Smith goes at 3. Because if Devontae Smith leaves the board at 3, that means without question, Jamar Chase will be on the board at 6. There's no way he's going to Atlanta with Julio Jones and Calvin Ridley. There's no way he's going to Cincinnati because they need O-line so bad. That means Jamar Chase falls to you. And all of these what-ifs, could-bes, should-we's all go away. Because Jamar Chase is on the board, you take Jamar Chase.
You take Jamar Chase.
Built for your roster and your quarterback. Jamar Chase, what he gives Jalen Hurts, the ability that he has to break off in a secondary release, and Jalen Hurts' ability to extend a play and roll the pocket, I mean, it is a match made in fucking football heaven, dude. It's the perfect guy.
Yeah, I agree with that, and I do like that comparison. I'll go back. I gotta go back and watch Harrison tape because I've been watching Smith tape and just kind of remember, because those seasons with Manning and Stokely and Reggie Wayne on the other side, and that was the greatest offense I saw for my money over a 3-year span. I mean, we watched probably at the beginning of our football lives, we watched the Rams with Torrey Holt and Isaac Bruce and Marshall Faulk, and then we got the pleasure of seeing the Colts with Manning, Harrison, Wayne, and Stokely, and it was just like it was a gem. Dallas Clark was there too at one point. So,
Joseph Adai was the running back for a couple of years. They had a really good offense, dude.
Yeah, it was fun to watch.
Jeff Saturday, probably the greatest center in football.
Yeah,
dude, that offense was fucking unbelievable.
It was fun to watch. Anything you want to add before we got to do another mock draft? I think we should do that next Sunday.
I'm down.
Tuesday we'll cover any news. We'll give ourselves a couple days, see some updates in free agency, and see what teams are making moves, and go from there. Any closing thoughts on Sixers? Real quick, we'll talk about this next time. Drew Brees retires today. The Saints extend Taysom Hill on a voidable deal that could be worth up to $40 million. I'm sure they're going to void it next year because he's not worth that, but it helps him out in the cap this year. Didn't end up being a huge fan of Drew Brees because of the lack of understanding of the flag situation. That being said, putting it aside, one of the greatest quarterbacks the game's ever seen, and probably won less Super Bowls than we all think he should have.
Top 7 all time.
That's a fair. I don't think top 5, but I think top 7's a great.
Yeah, he is a 5, 6, 7 depending on the list and the time, but he's a top 7 quarterback of all time.
Yeah, so good retirement. Saints probably won't be as good, but they'll probably win close to as many games because they have a good coaching staff and a good roster. We'll see what happens. We'll see what happens with Jameis Winston now that we know Drew Brees is out, and we'll go from there. We'll see you guys on Tuesday at probably Wednesday. I keep forgetting that extra day, man. It's fucking me up. I don't know.
The extra hour fucked me all the way up today. It's okay.
Missed your face, man. I woke up at 9 today. I was like, why did I wake up at 9? I was like, oh, the fucking clocks.
I woke up at 10:15, so that's all right. You did better than me.
Wifey must be on point if she's letting you sleep till that late with all those.
Gives me an hour in the morning because I do all the night feedings, so we're okay. We got a nice little setup.
Not running around, you're fucking lucky. We'll see you guys on Tuesday night.
Wednesday.
We'll see you guys on Wednesday night. We'll do a mock draft on Sunday. Big Facts, all streaming platforms, YouTube. We got to get your Twitter up, Facebook, personal pages, whatever you want to follow. Comment on the Big Facts page. It's the only way we can see your fucking comments. And that's all we got. Closing thoughts. Go ahead, Just.
I don't got much, brother. I think the Sixers are making great strides forward. Doc Rivers is fantastic. We need Daryl Morey to have a big trade deadline still. I'm not letting him off the fucking hook for that. I'm excited for baseball in a couple weeks, and to take all of the excitement away, you went first in the last mock draft. I'll go first in this mock draft, and we'll do that next Sunday.
Perfect. I can't wait to have a better draft than you again.
Have a great night, Aaron. I'll see you on Wednesday.
See you guys.